Hi, this is Elizabeth Agee from the Colorado Farm and Food Alliance, and we're here today to talk about water-wise irrigation systems and solutions for the North Fork Valley. Okay, so the drip irrigation systems kind of became popularized in Israel, and they were designed by water engineers to imitate desert rain, which is kind of pathetic, you know. And like, I mean, we get like like 14, 15 inches of rain a year or something. I think it was 17 a couple years ago, but it's here in Israel they get less. Um, yeah, it depends on like where you are. Yeah. But yeah, I would say like 10 to 20, you know. So yeah, so it's actually meant to mimic that natural biological process of like just a very gentle showering. And what it does is, you know, it has the emitters, which I actually need to go grab some of this over there. But it has emitters inside of it, and those are putting out just consistent drips. And it's like a certain amount, you know, per hour. And the idea is that it's training that root to like just get that little bit right on the root and like soak it all up. So you're actually like aiding and abetting in this like biological evolutionary process. And we'll talk about that. Like this system here is going to be comprised of multiple systems. Like there's the flood system in place, and I'm going to leave that. But then I'm going to be tethering like a drip system off of that that's operated with a valve. And so that can be isolated and shut off. And the reason for that is because I want to do a cover crop in my management plan of this field. I've already seeded a cover crop like 3 days ago. And then watered it by hand. But I do want to be able to use that flood system to water my cover crop. I just did it by hand that one time because we were supposed to get rain and then we didn't. And then we did right after I finished, which is great. But it needed like that deep soaking overhead. And so I did that once, and then now I'll be running the flood irrigation every couple of days for a couple weeks, you know, to get that established. And then I'm actually going to be bringing cows in here to like mow all the cover crop down and like poop and stuff. And then we're going to bring even more compost in because this field was growing corn for a really long time and is very depleted and had really bad weed pressure last year. But it just needs like some more layers of things. They grew sunflowers and some other clovers and stuff last year, and so there's some of that residue in the field, which is great. But we're going to be building up all of this soil, and then at that point planting like vegetables and perennials and herbs and a whole bunch of different things. So at that point it'll transition to the drip system. So it's going to be like two systems, and then there's like a city water tap that I use to water starts right now. You know what I mean? And then like I would use that, like at my house, I use city water to do a deep watering of my fruit trees in the early spring because I have a pond, but I don't have irrigation. No, I do it like 3 or 4 times. Like once, like twice, maybe twice a month, starting in like March or something. It depends on the plant. I think that's kind of like one of the arguments for permaculture and like perennial agriculture is if you do plant a perennial, like it's going to have that really extensive root system that stays alive year after year. And so it's able to kind of encode more information, you know, about the climate, and therefore like theoretically be able to adapt. Of course, that doesn't always happen, as we see with like our fruit trees all the time. So it's a theory, and like, you know, I think perennials and like xeric plants, like native plants, there's a lot of native foods that are like kind of more bitter often, like they're not like super sweet as like a commercialized, like a cultivated plant. But those basically, like I did xeric landscaping for like 6 years. And once they're established, they don't need water. Like I would go and remove the irrigation system after 3 years.
You just rely on the rain.
Yeah. Yeah, and like just like whatever that root system, like there's so much to that, but like with perennial systems, like they're actually pulling the water table up. Um, so if you see area, like I always tell people, like the Amazon is the original food forest because that was all planted. You know, I mean, like there were these plants, but then like people selected the ones they wanted and planted more like in the forest, and it was like a common resource. And the water table is really high. So it's like where people are planting trees and where people are stewarding the land, like they are healing the landscape and they are making it so that the water is more available for the plants. I I kind of do both. Like all of my designs and all of my consulting is both. It's like edible landscaping and like gardens and stuff, and then usually like incorporating a pollinator garden or incorporating pollinators like into the vegetable garden itself. And I work with a lot of native plants too. So I think a combination of like feeding yourself and feeding the ecosystem is a good way to go about it, you know? And that doesn't necessarily mean like, come on, deer, eat my kale, but like, you know, like planting for bees and stuff. And that's feeding something. Having cows, and I've thought a lot about like the future of ranching in this valley. And like, I mean, it is a grasslands, so it makes sense to have large ruminants on a grassland. But I do honestly think, and it's kind of like a sad thought, but it's only really sustainable if you have a lot of land, you know, like, I mean, yeah, both, you know, so that you can like maintain that pasture and do rotational grazing, which is like, you know, I'm trained in permaculture, and that's like mimicking the natural process of like the bison moving through to like a new field, you know, and continuously grazing. And it's just kind of controlling for that. But I really like, we have 3 acres, and I'm like, this is not really sustainable to have cows, you know, like holistic management in animals is I just seeded cover crop in this whole field, and it is oats and field peas, which cows really like. And it's going to come up over the next like month and a half. And then I'm going to bring my cows in here with my electrical fence, and I'm going to have them graze it down. And then I'm going to bring in compost because I want to grow a bunch of like tomatoes and stuff. And we'll bring in more compost and then transition, you know, to doing the vegetables, and then I'll plant cover crop again in the fall. So something like that, you know, might be of interest to you, because then you're building soil and you're getting like all these different returns, you know. I would say no, it's not that common. It's becoming more common. I think with farming, a lot of things are cultural, and like things have been done a certain way for a really long time, and there's a strong sense of tradition around that, like especially here, I think. And as a consultant for farmers, like you don't tell people how to farm. So, you know, I mean, you learn with that, and there's definitely like people who like are really passionate and like have like read tons about it, and like we're all like, ah, give me land, like I want to do all this stuff, you know. And like I know like Deer Tree Agroforest and Farm in Hotchkiss is a great example to see these practices that we're going to be doing here too. This is going to be an example garden, but they're like a few more years along, so you can see like the cover crops and then like the annual crops going in after that, and like the perennials coming back, and like all their like, what is it, like 4,000 trees or something that they planted on swells. So, you know, yes, there are definitely people doing it. I would say like if you counted all of the farms and you were like, are you doing this or not? I would say more are not. But I don't think, like people are very interested in it. And I think, so it's cultural, and I think it's also like risk averse. Like people are like, well, I heard about this, but I'm not going to do it until like I see what happens with my neighbor's field. Because it's like I've owned a large piece of property before. It's like a significant investment to do something, you know, even if it's like $300, if it doesn't work, that sucks, you know. So yeah, so I think it's education, it's cultural, it's like just doing more of this and talking about it and like normalizing more of these practices, you know, where we can talk about it like from an educated place and be like, well, I've seen this work in this way, and this is like the biological function of that or whatever. And then it becomes a little bit more grounded and something that people can like appreciate. It depends on what you plant, but ultimately the goal of cover crop is to keep roots in the soil, like living roots in the soil year round, which is like kind of difficult in Colorado, but not impossible. Thinking of winter specifically, but a lot of people just do 3-season cover crop plans. And so again, like with permaculture, everything, it depends on like your process. But like for here, we planted the peas, which are a great source of protein for my cows, but they're also nitrogen fixing. So they're helping bind the nitrogen into the soil to make it available for crops later on that are going to be grown there. And it's also like keeping that root in the soil is going to help with the water retention capacity of that soil. And it's going to like keep it from blowing away like you see in Delta this time of year, just like the dust bowl. That's what I think of. Sorry, I used to live out there. But so yeah, you know, and that's like they're not cover cropping. They're, what's that? Exactly, that as well. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the microbes, like they're like, and they like eat all of this like residue that's on the field over here. Like there is a lot more of it. Yeah. Yeah. And then they're breaking down all of that organic material and turning it into soil. So you're building soil. And it's kind of, you can think of it also like composting in place. Like, have you ever had a compost pile? So you want to, that's okay. So you want to like have a layer of carbon, like cuttings from bushes or leaves or like grass clippings or something. Grass clippings are a little more nitrogen-y, but they can work. So that, and then you want to do like your food scraps. And so that's your nitrogen. And so you have like a ratio of carbon to nitrogen, and you can achieve that in place in the field by basically like, you know, as this, for an example, like those were sunflowers and like different grasses and even weeds and stuff. And like those weren't controlled, like they weren't sprayed or anything. And we just let them winter kill. I didn't grow here last year. I just helped a little bit. But we planted buckwheat cover crop in the fall. And so a lot of that's the residue from that. And so that's being eaten. We've already had cows in here once. The cows broke down the first kind of layer. And then the cover crop is going to like, you know, just add more of that and like get more of the water in the soil, which helps break everything down as well. And then we'll have crops in here and then it becomes like mulch, you know, and then you just keep doing it again. Yeah, it's a relationship. I really think of gardening as a relationship. Yeah.
Question, is horse manure as good as cow manure?
No, it's a little, it tends to be kind of salty. You can use it, but I would mix it with something else. And also with animal manure, you usually want to let it like rest. Like if, say like you had a big pile of it or something, like it's not being exposed to the elements as much as if it was like spread on a field. So usually they say like 3 years you want to let manure sit before you use it on a garden because it can burn your crops.
Even goat manure?
I don't know if it's like acidic. It's just like got a lot of nutrients, and like compost actually cooks, you know, like it's the process of like decomposition. So like you can measure the temperature of a compost pile. It can be like 250 degrees or something crazy like that. And so like you're literally like your tomatoes like, like I can't do it. Ash from the fireplace. Yeah, you can do that. So that's getting more into, I feel like there's so many things we could talk about, and we should probably like talk about irrigation. But biodynamics is like the practice of kind of creating your own garden amendments with more localized materials and things that you can grow or wild harvest. And there's a man named Lloyd who grew here on this side last year, and he's going to be growing over there this year, and his workshop is right there. I don't know if I should have just told you all that, but he's cool. Go say hey. But he's like the biodynamic expert, one of them. There's many in this valley, but he teaches, and he also like prepares the preparations and sells them and applies them for farms and stuff like that. And so he'll be teaching more about that. But all of those different amendments are good for different things and at different points in the plant's life cycle. And that is like a whole lifelong pursuit. So I don't think we should like totally get into that. But yes, ash is good. And I can't remember what mineral. Does anyone know? Is it potassium? Maybe so, yeah. So like you need all these trace minerals, you know, like
Yeah, it's very alkaline.
yeah.
You gotta be careful, yeah.
Right. So like we have a pellet stove at my house and we put the ash in our compost, but it's just like every week, like once. It's a layer in our compost. And we also do like biochar sometimes, and we also do like, you know, coffee and like whatever, but it's like mixed into this like bigger thing. And I do landscaping still, so I do like grass clippings and stuff and Christmas trees. We composted Christmas trees this year and all kinds of stuff. We compost everything. So yes, you can compost pretty much anything, even bones and like meat and stuff. But that's a whole other conversation. So, okay, irrigation. Irrigation. So I guess first off, let's just talk about the North Fork and like irrigation. Like, what does that mean when I just say that to you? Like, what do you think of the larger irrigation system in the North Fork? Okay, ditches, dams, floods, dams. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, the open ditch system is like ancient, you know. I mean, this is like some frontier people being like, all right, here's the mountain, like here's my field, like, you know. And I mean, it was like engineers and stuff. I don't know the whole history about that, but it was, yeah, I mean, it was developed a really long time ago. And they just grow in that environment, you know. So like I don't think anyone planted it, but like the cottonwoods, you know, the cotton traveled on the rivers. Yeah, I mean, I want like, you know, 5 feet filtration and then the water table. Like that's what I want, like on any piece of land that I'm farming or gardening. Yeah, because that means that you have really good soil. If like this soil is improving, you know, it's in repair, but it's going to be very hard packed. And that's another benefit of the cover crop is like if you have this field baking for most of the year, you know, or even like part of the year, like that's actually killing the microbes and that's drying up all that like water retention and stuff like that. And it's just it's making a hard packed situation. And like you can go and look at land, even over here that isn't irrigated, and it's just cracked, you know, because it's just dried out like concrete. With flood irrigation, I don't really know. Like I'm not saying that flood irrigation is like good or bad. I think it has an application. I think that like if you are in the business of like growing trees or like you have a vegetable garden, like a drip system is usually going to be a better system in terms of conserving your water and also like the soil quality. Because with that flood irrigation, like one of the issues is that you're going to have that hard pan situation. Also, like that large like volume of water hitting soil is going to compact it as well. You're using a lot more water, which means that it's like less available to everyone, right? Because we're all connected in that way. And yeah, I mean, it's a drip irrigation system is developed, like I said, in Israel. So it's like getting the water where you want it on the plant. So you're encouraging that root. So you're encouraging the plant to do a lot of the work for you of the soil building too. And you're improving like the soil quality and the water retention capacity and all that kind of stuff. And like also you see issues with salt pooling. Like sometimes if you're driving through an area with fields and stuff, you'll just see like white, that's salt. And so that's like when you know, like people like flush their fields who do hay a lot of times at the beginning of the season just to try and get the salt off. It's not good for a lot of plants. A lot of plants won't thrive in that. It's not good for the fish. You know, that practice of having to remove it, like it's going to go into the river. Like, and yeah, and it's depleting the soil. I mean, think about it, like pouring salt on something, like it's not like nutritious for the soil. Small amount of sodium, but not that much. So yeah, I mean, I guess like with drip irrigation, we're more just trying to like create that relationship where it's like, where does the water actually need to go? And for that particular purpose. But if you're growing hay, like I wouldn't transition to drip. Like, what are you going to water every blade of grass? Like, I don't know how that would work. Although maybe someone does that, and like maybe someone has a different story about that, and I don't have any judgment. I just like wouldn't think to do that. So yeah, so I guess we can agree that flood is kind of the common practice for irrigation here. And then drip is becoming more popular, kind of like permaculture and like cover cropping and these ideas. And NRCS is kind of doing a lot of the work to advocate for that right now. They have grants available if you want to like put in a whole head gate system off of your flood irrigation or your ditch. And then that's like a pressurized box essentially, and then you can tie in a drip line or like put a spigot in and like attach it there. That is like, they help you with the cost, but it's still incredibly expensive. So I think that's a deterrent for a lot of people. Also, I looked into doing that on my farm, and they were like, it's going to be at least 3 years because there's just a waiting list of people like wanting to do that project right now. So they give preference to like agriculture, like large scale. Like if you have like a business plan of like, I'm doing this crop and planting trees and whatever, they give preference to those. But so I was like, okay, well, I don't have 3 years and I don't have like, 20K to drop on this right now. So I just started asking around and like figuring out how to do this myself, because that's how I do things. And so I'll show you, I'll just pass it around, the design for the drip system here. And so, I mean, I do this professionally, like I do design for people, but really my goal is like, I just want this to like be a thing, and I want people to know how to do it and to teach other people. And, like if it's something that someone wants to do, I want them to feel like they can do it. So that's by design. But I guess, could you just hold it up for a second? I could like explain it and then we can pass it around. It's probably more helpful. It's not labeled. Yep. So in that part, I actually just figured out, so it's not on here. But I'll show you with the actual equipment. I have the pieces, and we won't put together the whole system together. Like Pete said, we're still fundraising, so we have like, some things to buy still. But essentially this right here is a water holding basin. So it's likely going to be this. We might dig something, but it's likely going to be that because it's already there. And I'm going to line it with pond liner. And then I'll just show you this piece. It's called a saddle. And it's actually 3 different pieces. It's like a coupler attachment here, the saddle, and then the shutoff valve. And so I'm going to likely put this like here and drill a hole in the flood tube right here, and then attach this because it's got the inlet right there. And then I have primer and glue and do like some plumbing. It's actually pretty fun. I was always like, I don't know anything about plumbing, but I actually do now, so it's cool. It just seems like one of those like things that you have to like study for a really long time, and I'm sure you do. But there's also easy ways to do things. So this whole setup was like $40. And that's like a pressurized system as opposed to like 20K. I don't know. I mean, I still need a pump and stuff, but this whole system is going to cost about $2,000 with labor. 2,000. One. Yeah. But we're going to have some gardens over there, but they have a different line over there, a different irrigation line that they put in for a windbreak they planted. So I'll just tie into that for that one. But this system is going to irrigate this whole field. No, that was here. Yeah, so I have to take this apart. Like I just started working on this like this week. We just finalized the lease and everything. So I still need to take this apart and like put it back together. But I'm gonna put like some shutoff valves to like increase pressure into this quadrant. And then the source is really high, so it gets pretty good pressure. So this saddle ties into here. This is a shutoff valve. So, yep. Okay, and then I'll have some PVC, which I have over there. This is 2-inch. So this is 6-inch, and this is 2-inch. So it's also reducing for me, which is cool because it's usually another piece. This is really cheap. This is from Bollinger & Queen. They're cool. They'll help you with everything. So yeah, and so you attach the 2-inch PVC to this, and that'll go into this basin. And so at that point, my objective is going to be to figure out the capacity of this basin, and I'm going to figure out how much water I need to water a zone for the amount of time that I want. So this, let me draw this. Actually, I already did. Okay, beautiful picture. So this is the field. Those are trees. And this is the flood line. And so these are the different zones. So this half, the brown half, is going to be 4 different zones because it's going to be 4 incubator plots. And so they're each going to have their own timer or their own zone within a timer. I love these. I don't like complicated things. I do like some, I don't know, I like complicated biological things, but not technological things. This is very simple. It's battery operated. It's like $30. And they also make them that have 2 of these prongs on the bottom. This is 1 zone. If it has 2 of these, it's 2 zone. And so this is just a 1 zone one, but I'm going to get 2 that have 2 prongs. And so that'll be the 4 zones of the incubators, and I can program them to run at a certain time. And then the other half is going to be another 2 zones because one of them is managed by someone else and one of them is managed by me. So my goal is to figure out the capacity of this because I need to know how long I need to fill this to irrigate. I was trying to think of like an easy formula and like way to explain this, and I still need to figure out how to do that. But essentially you can like determine the volume of a pond. There's like pond volume calculators online where you just measure the depth and the length and the width and stuff like that, and it will tell you how many gallons it can hold. So I'm going to do that, but my objective is to water the 4 incubator plots all on the same day, and then the other 2 on the next day. So I want to water all of these zones 3 times a week. And so the incubators are going to be on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they're going to be in order. So I'll probably run them for like 30 minutes to 45 minutes. There's like some finagling. There's no like, it's different with every piece of land. But so it'll probably start at like 4 a.m. and then run zone 1, 4 to 4:30, zone 2, 4:30 to 5, zone 3, 5 to 5:30, you know, zone 4, 5:30 to 6. And then in that way, like it's continuously pulling from here, but like not too much. And like we're also like isolating the pressure into just one zone because you want to maintain pressure. And so like basically I'm going to have to figure out how many times I need to fill this in order to achieve that goal, because that's manual right now.
And then you will know how many gallons you're using for each plot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you want to know.
Yeah. And I just need to like figure out the volume of this, build this, and then do math for a day. And yeah, drink a bunch of coffee.
Maybe a question. So is the big 6-inch line, that is irrigation water?
Yes.
Is that a gated? I can't tell.
Yeah.
If it's gated.
It's gated to go out this way,
Okay.
and there's furrows.
That's relatively low pressure then, just gravity feed wherever it's coming from.
Yeah, and then so I'm gonna try and increase the pressure by putting like in between these where they connect. You can like take this apart, and then you can put what? It's like a shut-off valve. Shut-off valve, and then so you can like isolate it so it's pressurized in a certain area. And then all I really need it to do is to flow into here because I'm not trying to hook that up directly to a pump. So
Why wouldn't you want to hook that directly to the pump?
because this is operating as a filtration basin.
Oh.
So I
You're going to use this to remove some of the sediment and stuff?
yes. So naturally the sediment will accumulate in the bottom, and I'm going to line this with a pond liner. It's going to be regularly emptied, so it'll be pretty easy, like if I wanted to take the pond liner out and like shake it out, clean it that way. But so yeah, so this is our first point of, can I see the design? Are you still, sorry, I can hold it. Thank you. So this is this, right? And so the sediment will filter down to the bottom naturally with gravity. And then I build all kinds of stuff out of trash. And this little thing right here is, you know, those like drying racks for dishes? That wrapped with like a really fine mesh. And then enclosing around this piece of PVC that feeds down, and then there's like the foot valve on there, and then that's creating a suction lift that goes into a pump like that, but we're going to get a bigger pump. I just brought it to show you. And then so that's, the pump is going to be like on the side of this, pulling water. And so we have those 2 points of filtration, because that is an issue. Like people will be like, I hate drip irrigation because it gets clogged, and we have dishwater and you can't do it, but you can. You just like really have to be on your filtration game, and like multiple points of filtration throughout the line is a good idea. It also makes it easier to like isolate and figure out where the problem is if you do that. But so we have those 2, suction lift goes into the pump, goes into the line, which is going to be like along here probably. And then there's this thing called a spin filter. Does anyone know what a spin filter is? Yay. So it's this. I guess it wants to be with you. So this basically goes in line, right? And it's got a filtration system in there. So all the water is going through there, and it's like catching in here, and then it like spins it out. And you just take it apart. Like mud. I mean, at the beginning, like crawdads, maybe a mouse.
But eventually it will be very rich soil, will it not, that you get?
Well, so this is for the water. Like, so we don't want there to be a bunch of sediment in the irrigation water, because, Evelina, would you mind going into the trees over there and grabbing a roll of irrigation? I just thank you. Forgot to bring it over here. But so I'll show you in a second, but the tube that we're going to be using, it's a 1/2-inch plastic tube, and it has emitters that are installed inside. And so what those are doing is they're controlling the amount of water that's released and like the rate of it. So these I think are 0.6. Oh no, it's like closer to the road, like next to the chicken coop. Yeah. So it is. And I mean, you could totally like scrape it out of here and put it on the field. We just don't want it in the water. Yeah. And that's a great idea. Emitter. So this is, this stuff is a company called Rivulas, and it's an Israeli company. I really like Israeli companies. I think I put Israeli, I'll write the two. Netafim is one too. They're very similar, and their components are interchangeable, which is cool on some of their systems, their basic systems. Netafim. You have it, right? Okay, so yeah, so I guess it's a little confusing because the tie-in is not on this design, because this project originally was supposed to be at a different location. So I'm like redoing the design and doing the installation at the same time now. Yeah, but it's very similar. So this is that spin filter that I just showed you guys. And then down the line, I am considering installing this. This might be like a phase 2 thing if I need it. But so this is the line, and then it tees out and makes like a box. And then there's 2 more spin filters on either side of the box, and then it comes back together and goes back into the line. And the benefit of that is that it can like get smaller sediment, and it's diverting the pressure and dividing it by 2 to go out into these 2 different systems. So it's just like works better. And if, say, this side gets clogged, there's a shutoff valve on both sides, so I can isolate the one that's clogged, and the irrigation system can still work until I'm ready to fix it.
You have to have a ribbon cutting ceremony.
For the irrigation?
Baby going.
Yeah. Yeah, we have one grant that I'm just waiting for like the check to come. But then we need to do some fundraising, because we want to build a classroom, and I want to build like one of those traditional horno ovens, because we have a Southwest garden going in as well with all like dry land plantings and stuff. So there's a lot of things we would love to do, but we're for sure going to grow food. So we'll start with that. Yeah. So no, not my goal. So okay, and then it comes out, and then I have even another spin filter here, because everyone was just like, it's not going to work, and I'm like, what if we have 5 spin filters? Like, and I probably won't do that, but it's just easier. So anyway, there's another one, and then it's going to connect into a T, which I don't think I have, but I mean, this is a T. It's going to be a bigger T than this. And then the settling basin, and then, you know, you have the filter around the uptake inlet, and then you have all the spin filters. So that gives you a lot of opportunities to diagnose the problem. So if like part of the system is running, but another part isn't, then there's more areas where you can like kind of diagnose where that might be a problem. And so we're anticipating we're going to be hiring a farm manager, because I just don't have the time to do this and everything else that I'm doing. But I'm like still going to be managing it. But yeah, that'll be a big part of their job, I think, is just like maintaining that system and checking on it. And then again, like eventually it'd be cool to have a timer to fill the filtration basin, kind of, you know, but for now, yeah, that's a good idea. Forgot about float valves. Those are cool. Okay, thank you. So yeah, maybe we'll put a float valve in there. So yay, this is what I'm like. I'm figuring it out too. Like I'm not. Everyone's like, you're an expert. I'm like, okay. So, but when you're when you're expert, you stop learning. But okay, so these are 2 spigots, and they have trees on them. But so there's going to be a T. Think of my hands as the T, and that's going to be the riser. Can you show one more time? This right here, and see it has the spigots off the side. It's just attached with these couplers, and then that's going to come up, and then the timers will connect to these. You can put a splitter off of one of these, and then have 2 timers running off of one of these. So for this system, we need 4 timers because the incubator ones are 2 zones per timer. So there's 4 zones, 2 timers for the incubators, and then 2 timers for the food plot. And then Tess, who's doing the herbs, medicinal herbs over here, will have her own zone as well. So they're installed inside of the pipe. I guess I could cut one open and show you. So I'll just show you this emitter real quick, and then I'll answer that question.
Do you want to come more?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. You can get different ones. This is on 18-inch. And so I got all this for free. I got like $2,000 worth of irrigation stuff for free because this guy grew hemp. And he was like, we're not doing that anymore. I was like, okay. And so he's just giving away all of his. It depends on what you're growing. Like what? Like, yeah. So there are systems that's just, it's called a blank line.
And then there's a like punch tool.
Yeah. Yep. There's a tool, there's a blank line which doesn't have these emitters installed, and you can buy emitters and put them wherever you want. And some people prefer to do that. So if say you have a vegetable garden that's, or like a field or whatever, that's like 25 by 20, then I would just like say this is your entry point for the irrigation. I'd do like a snaky. Yeah, depending on what you're growing. Like if it's going to be a pretty big crop, then it can be further apart. So I recommend putting it on top of the soil, but under the mulch. If you bury it, it's like really hard to fix. If something happens, you have to dig it up and find where it's broken.
And you probably broke it with your shovel anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I did landscaping for a long time, and I've learned like not to do that, you know. But sometimes, yeah. Yeah, or like if people don't like mark before you come. Okay, I always call what is it, like 911 or something, and they'll like come out and put lines where your power lines are if you're ever having any kind of work done, so that they don't cut them, like your power line, your water line, stuff like that. But okay, so this is the emitter, and so that's just controlling how much water. I believe these are 0.36 gallons per hour per emitter, and they're 18 inches apart.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that depend partly on how much pressure you have?
Yeah. And that's like kind of where the math comes in, and the like finagling and figuring out like by doing it, you know, like there's, yeah, like you, and like what I was talking about would be like one system of doing that. Like it would be different for your system, you know. Yeah.
I kept thinking, well,
It's
how's
a,
it gonna get out?
yep,
There.
right there.
Can I ask you a question about the kinks? I put in this last year,
Mhm.
and I just drilled the holes in it. But the biggest problem wasn't anything else but the kinking, you know.
Mhm.
And I just don't know how to get the kinks out other than to make it completely straight.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to?
So I do tend to do this kind of pattern. And we can we can lay some out. That was my plan, is to kind of talk, and I don't know how much time we have. But I can stay here as long as anyone wants to too. But yeah, I think it would be great to lay out some of the line in this field just to like get a feel for what that is like. And it would also really help me, because otherwise I'll just do it all by myself. But for the kinking, I do tend to do that. So like for this, like the entry point is going to be on this side. It actually does flood a little bit from that field because of them irrigating for the pasture up there. That's Bobby and Mary's sheep and big old bull. But I'm still going to irrigate those fields even though they do get some of that runoff. And so it'll basically start in this far corner and then run the entire length, and then put an elbow, and then like a little tiny like 6-inch piece, and then another elbow, and then come back up, and then do like connector pieces to connect the rows. And so we just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then these. Landscaping ties. So yeah, like every foot or 2 feet, 2 feet's probably fine. You put these over it and then get a handy dandy mallet and pound them in, or a rock if you forgot your mallet. So yeah, so the pump is only going to be pulling water from the flood, or no, it's only going to be pumping when we're irrigating. Yeah. So it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of got like these little filters on it, and it just pulls only a certain amount of water at a time, you know, because like if you just got the blank line and then punctured holes in it, it would be like not very consistent. And it would also be like too much a lot of times, like in like lower points, the pressure would be much higher. And so this regulates it consistently. But we've talked about other things. Okay, so we've talked about flood, we've talked about drip. Dry land, we are going to be doing over here. And that is where you plant seeds that are adapted already to drought tolerant conditions. So like Navajo and Hopi seeds are really good. The Three Sisters, corn, squash, and beans. There are very, very old genetics of different varieties of these plants. And there are people in like San Luis Valley area and like northern Arizona who have been practicing this for like thousands of years, literally, and they just water once. Like you plant the Three Sisters, you water once, and they're all so drought tolerant that you do get a crop. And so it's something I really want to try, and I think it's going to be important because water is an issue, you know, and we could talk about that all day, but we won't. So yeah, so that's dry land, which is kind of the absence of irrigation. And then city versus ditch water, we've kind of already talked about. If you have ditch water, it's better to find a way to use it for your crops because it's going to be cheaper. And, you know, the city water is allocated differently. And, you know, all these things are all connected and influence everybody else. And And then water saving irrigation methods. We've mainly been talking about drip line, but there's other things like rainwater catchment. Again, it does not rain very much, but you can get a very large illegal rainwater catchment system. They're like, legally you can get a 50-gallon. If you want to stick with that, then you can, one of the like loopholes is that you can put one of these spigots on the bottom of your rain barrel and connect it to a drip system and have it continuously running. And then you're actually, you know, accumulating more rainwater. Yeah, over and over. So you can do that. It's like, you know, I mean, I used to work with the guy who got rainwater barrels legalized in Colorado. There's Colorado Greywater, which I think is on here, their website. That's Avery Ellis, former business partner of mine. And he just puts these systems in, whatever size people want. And he's kind of doing it to challenge the system. And like, I mean, nobody's gotten a fine or arrested, or if anything, they've gotten like a city commissioner being like, what are you doing? How did you do that? You know? So again, that's like the social, cultural side of these changes, you know, is like, well, you know, like we can wait for it to be legal, or we can like be a part of the process of getting it legal. That's how I see it. Save it if you got it, you know, like I think there's so many different ways to do that. Like I know Uji and Ken McGuire, they're sheep farmers, Desert Rear Farm up Garvin Mesa. And I worked with them on a project, and they have a barn that like just the overhang kind of perfectly overhangs into a trowel. And so in the winter, they just, you know, they don't have to fill the trowel. So it's pretty cool. Oh, that rainwater catchment, and then gray water system is like kind of the other thing, but that's capturing the water that you're using in your house. So like gray water is that which is coming from like your kitchen. Some people consider that gray water, but like the bathroom and the laundry machine are kind of the most common ones. And it's where you're actually rerouting that water into your garden. And it's recommended that you do it on like trees and not like annual crops so much. And there's also like certain soaps that you should avoid. And, you know, like using Bronner's or something like that is pretty kosher, and it'll be just absorbed and neutralized by the soil. But it's a great way to use your water twice, you know, that you're paying for, and that is such a precious commodity in general, but in this part of the world especially. So there's that, and then there's also like passive catchment, which is more like earthworking, like berms and swells and stuff like that, and that's actually changing the landscape. So like here, it would be like looking at the contour of this hill and finding strategic places where that contour changes, and then digging a ditch along the face of it, so like this. And then that will capture the water, encourage it to go down and be absorbed into the water table and into the subsoil. So that's a whole other thing. And then Oyas are really cool. And this is more, unless like you just love doing pottery and you have a kiln or something, they just get really expensive. It's more for like home scale gardening. But say like I was trying to irrigate all of this, and then I want to water that tree, but it's like over there. So instead of like running a line over to that tree, you can get, this is an ancient Mayan technology, and it's pat. So it's like a piece of pottery that's been bisqued. Yeah, so like with pottery, you fire it once, and then you glaze it usually, and that's what seals it and prevents it from being porous. But our goal here is to maintain the porosity. So you bisque it, and people make these and sell them and stuff. There's a company called Grow Oya who's awesome. And you bury it next to said tree or plant, and then I surround it with like coconut coir, or like perlite or something that like is good at retaining soil moisture. And you fill it with water, and it has like a little cork top, and then it slowly percolates into the surrounding soil. It depends on the size that you get, but it can go like 5 feet out. So it could water like a whole garden, like if you have a little garden bed. And yeah, and you only have to fill them like once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on how like dry your area is and like exposed and stuff. So they're really cool. I mean, I've installed them. I used to do like all xeric and like small scale landscaping in like Boulder area and Lyons and stuff. And I've installed tons like with freshly planted like 3-year-old fruit trees, and they did great. Yeah, check it out. Grow Oya is a really growoya.com. Nope.
There are also a lot of potters in town.
Yeah.
A lot of ceramic artists in town. There
Yeah.
are also a lot of ceramic artists in town. You can commission. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great to have a local producer. So that's Oya's. And then there's also like sheet mulching, which is a way of retaining water and building soil. And I'm not going to get into that right now because I feel like we need to stick with drip. But okay, so transition from flood to drip. The next section is when to do it and when not to do it. And we've kind of already talked about that. But if you have like a pasture system, you know, like a field that's planted like this consistently with a couple different species, keeping the flood makes sense. Some people will transition to sprinklers and stuff like that. You know, that's your prerogative. But for me, like being a bootstrapping farmer, like if I don't have to replace something, I don't. So there's that. And then if you're wanting to transition a pasture to like crops or an orchard, flowers, stuff like that, then that might be a good time to think about this drip system. But again, it might be a hybrid transition where you're still maintaining the flood system and using that at strategic points in the year. And then sprinklers. Sprinklers can like be awesome. Like I considered, like if I wasn't doing this as a teaching thing, like I would probably just get like a sprinkler cart and like push it around and it would just like water this field in like an hour. But because it's so much less plastic and I, you know, like I just have like endless moral qualms about like everything in the world. Because everything's so complicated. But I think that, you know, drip is good for a lot of reasons and it does conserve a lot more water than the sprinklers. But some people will do sprinkler carts. My friend at Sustainable Settings grows medicinal herbs that way on what was previously pasture. But she had to do a bunch of soil work first. Yeah, so that might be a good time. Like sprinklers can also, like if you have a lawn with like a sprinkler system and you wanted to transition your lawn to something else, that would be a good time to transition sprinkler to drip as well. So, and then there's resources on here. There's Israel, because they be leading things and being awesome. So there's a really good article about them. And then there is, the next one is kind of like the permaculture approach to water management, which talks about a lot of things that we've talked about, but in more detail. And then Colorado Greywater, if you're interested in a greywater system, that's a good place to learn about it and learn about like the soaps that you can use and just kind of how those systems work. And then the other one is a really long, tedious study about the benefits of drip irrigation, if you're inclined, and nerdy like me. So everything's blowing, but that's pretty much it for like the talk. I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I kind of want to like do stuff and do some like hands-on learning, you know, and it would be really beneficial to the plot and, you know, if everyone wants to help a little bit. And then also, I think it's the best way to learn. So if this is something that interests you on your own land, then putting it together is how you'll learn how to put it together again. So you guys want to put some stuff together? all the help that we can get. If you're interested in helping our mission to grow food for people in need and for the next generation of farmers, we're doing volunteer days every Wednesday from 3 to 7 at the incubator plot, 1221 2nd Street in Paonia. And you can also follow us online at colo farmfood.org.